The light is a physical thing. It presses against my eyelids, hot and white, and for a second, I think I'm dreaming. Then the sound crashes in. A roar. Not of anger, but of approval. A wave of applause so immense it feels like the building is about to lift off its foundations. My name is echoing, bouncing off the crystal chandeliers and the gilded ceiling, a name I haven't heard said with such importance in over a decade. Eliza Mayhew. My heart is a frantic drum against my ribs. I can feel the plush velvet of the chair beneath my fingertips, the only thing grounding me to this reality. I open my eyes. The entire ballroom is on its feet. A sea of smiling, clapping faces, all turned toward me. My table is a blur of ecstatic motion. My friend, Sarah, is grabbing my arm, her face split in a grin of pure joy. My small team, the 3 young women who believed in me when I barely believed in myself, are weeping openly. And then my eyes find him. He's 10 tables away, seated at a place of honor near the stage. My husband, Mark. He isn't clapping. He isn't smiling. He is frozen, a statue carved from ice. His hand, the one holding a champagne flute, is suspended halfway to his lips. His mouth is slightly agape, the perfectly tailored lines of his tuxedo suddenly looking like a costume on a man who has just seen a ghost. His eyes are locked on mine, wide with a dawning horror that is more satisfying than any award. In them, I see the whole story. The years of casual dismissal, the whispered insults that were sharper than any knife, the final, crushing betrayal. And now this utter, complete, and public annihilation of the world he had so carefully constructed, where he was the sun, and I was just a pale, forgotten moon, only visible by his reflected light. He thought he had buried me. He thought he had destroyed me. He's looking at me now on this stage under these lights, and he's finally realizing he didn't just fail to bury me. He accidentally planted a seed. If you've ever felt like a ghost in your own life, tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if you're new here, please subscribe. Knowing you're out there helps more than you can possibly imagine. Our story, or what passed for it, began in a world that smelled of leather and old money. Mark's world. I was a junior graphic designer with a portfolio full of bright, audacious ideas. He was a rising star in corporate finance, a man who moved through rooms with an unnerving confidence, a predator in a bespoke suit. He called my art charming. He called my ambition cute. I was young, and I mistook his condescension for affection. I mistook his control for stability. He courted me with a calculated precision. Dinners at restaurants where the water glasses were never empty, weekend trips to places I'd only seen in magazines. He painted a future for me, a beautiful, gilded cage. "You won't have to work, Eliza," he'd murmur, tracing the line of my jaw. "You can focus on your hobbies. I'll take care of everything. I'll take care of you." It sounded like a promise. It sounded like love. I now know it was the first brick being laid in the wall of my prison. I quit my job. We got married in a lavish ceremony he orchestrated down to the last petal. We moved into a house that felt more like a museum than a home, a sterile expanse of white marble and gray furniture that seemed to absorb all color, all life. My art supplies gathered dust in a spare room he called my craft corner. My days became a long, monotonous series of tasks designed to make his life seamless. I managed the house, the staff, the social calendar. I was the perfect corporate wife, an elegant accessory on his arm at fundraisers and dinner parties. I smiled when he told his friends, "Liza is my secret weapon. She keeps the whole machine running so I can focus on what matters." They'd all nod, their wives smiling those same practiced hollow smiles. We were the invisible engineers of our husband's success. The man I thought I married began to fade, replaced by this new Mark. The Mark who would come home and barely look at me, his eyes already on his phone, scrolling through market reports. The Mark who would critique the dinner I'd spent hours preparing. A bit too much salt, don't you think? The Mark who would casually dismiss my opinions. I'd mention a political article I'd read, and he'd pat my hand. "Don't worry your pretty little head about it, darling. It's complicated." His favorite weapon was money. It was all his, and he never let me forget it. I had an allowance deposited into an account he monitored. Every purchase was scrutinized. A new dress for one of his work events would be met with a raised eyebrow. Another one? Was the blue one not good enough? A book I bought was a frivolous expense. He wasn't just controlling the finances. He was controlling my access to the world, to joy, to anything that was just for me. My world shrank until it was the size of our perfectly manicured lawn. My friends, the ones from my old life, drifted away. It was too hard to explain why I could never meet for a spontaneous lunch, why every expenditure had to be justified. They didn't understand the quiet humiliation of having to ask your husband for money to buy a coffee. So I stopped trying. I became an island. The turning point, the tiny crack in the foundation of my compliance, came on a Tuesday. It was our 8th anniversary. I'd spent the day cooking his favorite meal. I put on the dress he liked, the one he'd approved of. I waited. He came home 3 hours late, smelling of whiskey and someone else's perfume. He didn't even notice the table set with our best china. He tossed his keys on the marble countertop, the sound echoing in the cavernous silence. "I'm exhausted," he announced, loosening his tie. "I'm going to bed." "Mark," I said, my voice small. "It's our anniversary." He turned, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of annoyance, not forgetfulness, in his eyes. "Oh, right. That. Look, I've had a brutal day. We'll do something this weekend." He never remembered. The weekend came and went in a blur of golf for him and silence for me. The flowers I'd bought wilted in their vase. The leftovers from the anniversary dinner I'd so carefully prepared went into the trash. And something inside me, something I thought had died long ago, began to stir. A cold, hard knot of anger. It was the first real thing I'd felt in years. I started small. I found my old sketchbooks, the paper brittle with disuse. I opened my dusty box of watercolors. At first, my hands felt clumsy, alien. The lines were shaky, the colors muddy. But I kept at it, stealing moments when he was at work or on business trips. The guest room became my sanctuary. I'd lock the door, turn on some music, and for a few hours, I would disappear. I wasn't Mark's wife. I wasn't a homemaker. I was just Eliza, a woman with a pen and a blank sheet of paper. I started designing stationery. Intricate floral patterns, whimsical animal sketches, bold geometric designs. I poured all the frustration, all the loneliness, all the muted colors of my life onto the page and transformed them into something beautiful. I wasn't thinking about a business. I was just trying to save myself, to create a small corner of the world that was mine. The inciting incident, the shove that pushed me from a secret hobby into a desperate gamble, happened at his company's annual Christmas party. I was standing by his side, smiling my perfect, plastic smile as he held court with his colleagues. One of his partners, a man named Henderson, turned to me. "So, Eliza, what do you do to keep busy all day while this one's out conquering the world?" Before I could answer, Mark laughed. It was a loud, booming sound that drew everyone's attention. "Oh, Liza has her little projects. Don't you, darling? She makes cards." "Very pretty cards." He said the word cards as if it were something distasteful, something you'd scrape off the bottom of your shoe. The group chuckled politely. I felt a hot flush of shame creep up my neck. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. But then he delivered the final, killing blow. He draped his arm around my shoulders, a gesture that looked affectionate but felt like a restraint. "Honestly, I don't know what she'd do without me. She's a creative soul, you know? Not really built for the real world. God love her. She can't even balance a checkbook." He squeezed my shoulder, a signal to smile, to play along with the joke. "She's a nobody without me, but she's my nobody." The world went silent. The polite laughter, the clinking of glasses, the festive music, it all faded into a dull roar. All I could hear were his words, echoing in my head. A nobody without me. It wasn't just an insult. It was a declaration. It was how he saw me. It was what he believed. In that moment, Standing in a room full of powerful people, wearing a dress that cost more than my first car, I had never felt so poor, so utterly worthless. I went home that night, and I didn't sleep. I sat in my craft corner, the pretty cards he'd mocked spread out on the desk in front of me. And I made a decision. He was wrong. He had to be wrong. And I would spend every last ounce of my strength proving it. The next day, I began my new life. In secret, I used the small amount of cash I'd managed to save over the years, squirreling away $20 here, $50 there from the household budget. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I bought a domain name, The Gilded Page. I taught myself how to build a website using online tutorials, my laptop screen illuminating my face late into the night. I learned about e-commerce, about payment gateways, about search engine optimization. My brain, which Mark had long ago dismissed as unfit for the real world, felt like it was waking up from a long hibernation. It was hungry. It was sharp. My first struggles were clumsy and humbling. I tried to take product photos with my phone, and they came out dark and blurry. I ordered a batch of envelopes from an online supplier that turned out to be flimsy and cheap. My first few sales were to friends, pity purchases that felt more like charity than commerce. I'd pack each order with painstaking care on my guest room floor, writing a handwritten thank you note for each one, my heart swelling with a gratitude so fierce it bordered on desperation. Mark remained oblivious. He was too consumed by his own world to notice the new flicker of life in mine. He saw my late nights as signs of insomnia, my distraction as simple-mindedness. "You seem tired, Liza," he'd say, not with concern, but with a hint of accusation, as if my exhaustion was an inconvenience to him. The first real breakthrough came from a small lifestyle blogger. She had a few thousand followers, but they were loyal. She'd ordered a set of my botanical-themed note cards and posted a picture of them on her Instagram feed. She hadn't tagged me or mentioned the shop name, but one of her followers asked in the comments, "Where are those from?" "They're gorgeous." The blogger replied with my shop's name. My phone started buzzing. Then it didn't stop. The notification sound, a cheerful little chime, became the soundtrack to my secret revolution. Orders poured in. 10, then 20, then 50 in a single day. I was ecstatic, terrified, and overwhelmed. I spent 48 hours straight packing boxes, my hands raw from the paper and tape. I'd sneak them out to the post office in the trunk of my car like a smuggler, my heart pounding every time I saw a police car, an absurd fear gripping me. The business was growing, and with it the challenges. I couldn't keep running it from the guest room. The boxes were taking over. The smell of ink and cardboard was becoming impossible to hide. I needed space. I needed help. But I had no money. The profits were immediately being funneled back into supplies. I took a risk. There was a piece of jewelry, a diamond tennis bracelet Mark had given me for our 5th anniversary. He'd never once seen me wear it. He'd bought it because it was what a man like him was supposed to buy for his wife. It had no sentimental value. It was just a symbol of my gilded cage. One afternoon, while he was at a golf tournament, I drove to a reputable jeweler in a town an hour away. I walked in, my hands trembling, and walked out with a check that felt like the key to my own liberation. With that money, I rented a small, windowless studio in a rundown industrial park on the other side of town. It was dingy and smelled of dust, but it was mine. It was the first space in 8 years that Mark had no claim to. I told him I'd joined a book club that met 3 times a week. It was a flimsy lie, but he didn't question it. He didn't care enough to. I hired my first employee, a college student named Chloe, who was studying design. She had a sharp eye and a tireless work ethic. She saw the passion in my work, not the cute hobby Mark saw. Then came Maya, a logistics whiz who organized my chaotic inventory system into a model of efficiency. We were a tiny, secret army of 3, fueled by coffee and a shared dream. The Gilded Page was becoming a real brand. We were featured on larger blogs. We were picked up by a few small boutiques. The orders became more consistent, the profits more substantial. I opened a separate bank account, one Mark knew nothing about. For the first time in my marriage, I had my own money. The feeling was intoxicating. It was power. It was freedom. But as my world expanded, the risk of it colliding with Mark's grew larger. He started to notice my absences more. "Another book club meeting?" he'd ask, the skepticism creeping into his voice. "What book are you reading that's so fascinating?" I'd stammer a title I'd seen on a bestseller list, my heart hammering. He started checking the car's mileage. He'd casually pick up my phone. I was living on a knife's edge, my two lives running parallel, the space between them shrinking every day. The inevitable happened on a rainy Thursday in October. I had to stay late at the studio to pack a massive wholesale order. I'd told Mark I was having dinner with a friend from my old life, Sarah. It was a stupid mistake. Sarah was one of the few friends I'd kept in touch with, and she occasionally came to our house for dinner. I walked in just after 10, exhausted but exhilarated. The order was done. We'd met our deadline. I found Mark sitting in the dark living room, a single lamp casting long shadows across the floor. A glass of scotch sat untouched on the table beside him. "How is Sarah?" he asked. His voice was unnervingly calm. "Good," I said, my mouth suddenly dry. "She's good. Sends her love." He stood up and walked over to the fireplace. He picked up his phone from the mantel. "That's funny," he said, still not looking at me. "Because I ran into her husband at the gym this evening. He said Sarah was at home, helping her son with a history project." The bottom dropped out of my stomach. The silence in the room was absolute. I couldn't breathe. He knew. He turned to face me, and his expression was not one of anger or hurt. It was something far colder. It was a look of triumphant calculation. He held up his phone. On the screen was the homepage of the Gilded page. My designs, my name, my story. "A book club," he said, the words dripping with sarcasm. "How stupid do you think I am, Eliza?" I braced myself for the explosion, for the yelling, the accusations. But it never came. Instead, he smiled. It was the most terrifying smile I had ever seen. It didn't reach his eyes. "A cute little business," he said, walking towards me. He reached out and tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear. His touch was like ice. "You've been very busy, haven't you? Playing shopkeeper." He wasn't angry that I had lied. He was offended that I had dared to build something without him. That I had a life, a thought, an ambition that didn't revolve around him. He saw my success not as an achievement, but as an act of rebellion, an act of war. "Don't worry," he whispered, his face just inches from mine. "I'm not mad. But this little hobby of yours is over. It's distracting you from your real responsibilities. From me. Starting tomorrow, you're going to shut it down. And we will never speak of it again." I stood there, frozen in the cold, sterile foyer of our perfect house, and I realized my mistake. I had underestimated him. I had thought he was just a dismissive, arrogant man. I was wrong. He was a tyrant, and I had just challenged his rule. The war had just begun. For a week, I lived in a state of suspended terror. I went to the studio, but I felt like a ghost. I'd sit at my desk, unable to design, unable to think. Mark's words echoed in my ears. "This little hobby of yours is over." He was watching me. He'd call me multiple times a day, his tone light, but the questions were pointed. "Where are you, darling? What are you up to?" He was a spider, and I was the fly caught in his web, waiting for him to make his move. I told Chloe and Maya what had happened. They were furious on my behalf. "You can't let him do this," Chloe said, her eyes blazing. "This is your dream." "But what can I do?" I whispered, the despair of physical weight in my chest. "He controls everything. The house, the money, me." Mark's first attack was subtle, insidious. He was a master of psychological warfare. He started by poisoning the well. We'd be at a dinner party, and he'd find a way to bring up my little project in the most demeaning way possible. "You should see Eliza's little office," he'd say to a circle of his powerful friends. "It's in this charmingly rustic old building. I'm a little worried about the rats, but she insists it has character." He would talk about my business as if it were a child's lemonade stand, a silly diversion to keep me occupied. He was framing me as a bored, slightly pathetic housewife, and by extension, my business as a joke. I could feel the shift in how people looked at me. The pitying glances from the other wives, the dismissive smiles from their husbands. He was eroding my credibility before I even had a chance to build it. Then the attacks became more direct. Our largest boutique client, a chic shop in the city that accounted for almost a third of our revenue, suddenly canceled their spring order.
No explanation.
Just a curt email. I called the owner, a woman I'd had a wonderful relationship with. She was evasive, uncomfortable.
I'm sorry, Eliza.
It's a business decision. I found out later that Mark played golf with her husband, who happened to be her business's primary investor. I had no proof, but I knew. Mark had made a call. He was strangling my business, and he was doing it with a smile on his face. He never raised his voice. He never explicitly forbade me from going to the studio. He just made it impossible for me to succeed. He wanted me to fail. He wanted me to come crawling back to him, to admit that he was right, that I was nothing without him. The next blow was financial. He came into my home office one evening, a stack of papers in his hand. "Darling," he said, his voice laced with false sympathy. "We need to talk. I've made some unfortunate investments. The market has been volatile. We're going to need to tighten our belts for a while." He showed me statements, charts, numbers that swam before my eyes. He explained that a significant portion of our joint savings was gone. I knew he was lying. Mark was too smart, too ruthless to make a bad investment. He was hiding the money. He was cutting off my access to any potential capital, ensuring I couldn't expand, couldn't weather the storms he was creating. He was starving me out. The pressure was immense. The bills for the studio were piling up. I had to pay Chloe and Maya. The canceled orders, the financial squeeze, it was all a coordinated assault. I was barely sleeping. I lost weight. The joy I had found in creating was replaced by a gnawing anxiety. Every ring of the phone made me jump. Every email notification sent a jolt of fear through me. The crisis deepened when the online attacks began. A flood of one-star reviews appeared on our website and our social media pages overnight. They were vicious, and they were specific. Products arrived damaged. Customer service is a nightmare. Cheap materials, not worth the price, they were all fake. I knew it, but to the outside world, they looked real. My sales plummeted. The cheerful chime of my phone fell silent. The silence was more terrifying than any alarm. I spent days trying to do damage control, responding to each fake review with desperate politeness, offering refunds and apologies for orders that had never existed. It was like trying to empty the ocean with a teaspoon. For every review I had taken down, 2 more would appear. He had an army of ghosts, and I was fighting them alone. One evening, I was working late at the studio, trying to untangle the financial mess, trying to figure out how I was going to make payroll.
My phone rang.
It was Mark. "Just calling to see when you'll be home, darling," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "Don't work too hard on your little project. It's not worth the stress." And I broke. I hung up the phone, slid off my chair, and collapsed onto the cold concrete floor. I curled into a ball, surrounded by boxes of stationery I couldn't sell, and I sobbed. Not quiet, dignified tears, but ugly, guttural sobs that tore through my body. It was the sound of a dream dying. He had won. He had systematically, brilliantly, and cruelly crushed me. He had proven his point. I was a nobody. I lay on that floor for what felt like hours. The despair was a physical presence, a heavy blanket smothering me. I thought about giving up. I could shut it all down, go back to my beautiful, empty house, and be the perfect, silent wife he wanted me to be. It would be easier. It would be safer. The fight was gone. I was empty. My eyes drifted across the room to a corkboard on the wall. Pinned to it were sketches, color swatches, and a few of the early, handwritten thank you notes from my first customers. And in the center of it all was a photo. It was a picture of me at my college graduation, my art portfolio clutched in my hand. I was 22, and my face was full of a fierce, unshakable belief in myself. I looked at that girl, at the fire in her eyes, and I felt a flicker of something deep inside me.
Shame.
What would she think of me now, crying on the floor of a dusty warehouse, defeated by a bully? What had happened to her? I had let him extinguish that fire, ember by ember, with his casual cruelty and his suffocating control. His words came back to me, not as an echo of defeat, but as a challenge. She can't even balance a checkbook, not really built for the real world, a nobody without me. A new kind of anger began to burn through the despair. It wasn't the hot, helpless anger I'd felt before. This was cold. It was quiet. It was steel. He thought this was a game he was winning. He thought he was breaking me. He had no idea what he was really doing. He was forging me into a weapon. I pushed myself up off the floor. My knees were stiff. My face was blotchy and tear-stained, but my spine was straight. I walked over to my desk, sat down, and opened a new document on my laptop. The title I typed was Project Phoenix, the old Eliza was dead. She had burned to ashes on this cold, concrete floor. It was time to see what would rise. My strategy shifted. I stopped playing defense. I stopped reacting to his attacks. It was time to go on the offensive. But I wouldn't use his tactics. I wouldn't fight with cruelty and lies. I would fight with the one thing he had underestimated in me, my intelligence. He thought I was a fragile artist. He forgot I was also a problem solver, a designer. And what is design, if not the art of finding elegant solutions to complex problems? Mark was a very complex problem. First, I needed to understand my enemy. I began to study him. Not as my husband, but as a competitor. His ego was his greatest weakness. He needed to be seen as successful, powerful, benevolent. His public image was everything to him. That was his center of gravity. That was the target. I stopped trying to fight the fake reviews one by one. It was a losing battle. Instead, I embraced them. I wrote a blog post on my website. It was titled, A Story of Sabotage. I didn't name names. I didn't point fingers. I simply told the story of a small, woman-owned business being targeted by a relentless and anonymous online campaign. I was honest about the damage it was causing, about the struggle.
I laid my vulnerability bare.
And then I asked for help. I asked my real customers, the ones who had been with me from the beginning, to fight back for me, to share their real experiences, to post their own photos of my products. The response was a tidal wave. My inbox was flooded with messages of support. My social media feeds exploded with pictures of my stationery in people's homes, on their desks at their weddings. The hashtag #MyGilded page started trending in our small corner of the internet. My customers became my army. They drowned his army of ghosts in a sea of authenticity. My sales didn't just recover. They doubled. His attack had backfired. He had tried to burn me down, and instead, he had given me the greatest marketing campaign I could have ever dreamed of. Next, I tackled the financial problem. I knew he was hiding money, but I couldn't prove it. I needed leverage. I started paying closer attention. I listened to his work calls, the ones he took on speakerphone in his home office, assuming I was too simple to understand. I started looking at the mail, at the financial statements he left lying on his desk. He was arrogant. He was sloppy. He didn't think I was a threat, so he didn't bother to cover his tracks for me. I found it in a sheaf of papers for a holding company in Delaware I'd never heard of. It was a shell corporation. He was siphoning money from his own firm, small amounts at first, then larger ones, and funneling it into this company. He was embezzling. Not just from our joint accounts, but from his own partners. He was building a nest egg for himself, likely in preparation for a divorce where he would leave me with nothing. I didn't have the expertise to understand all the details, so I hired someone who did. I used the new surge in profits from the business to secretly retain a forensic accountant, a woman named Evelyn, who was sharp, discreet, and utterly ruthless when it came to numbers. She worked remotely, and we communicated through encrypted channels. I would sneak photos of documents and email them to her. She began to piece together a map of Mark's financial crimes. It was a paper trail of his greed and his betrayal. While Evelyn was digging, I set a trap of my own. I knew Mark was watching my every move online. He was obsessed with my business, with my failure. So I decided to give him something to watch. I started developing a new product line, a series of high-end leather-bound journals. I posted sketches on my social media, wrote blog posts about my sourcing process for the finest Italian leather, and created mock-ups of the final product. It was all a complete fabrication. The designs were intentionally flawed with a binding technique that I knew would fall apart. The leather supplier I mentioned was a fake company I had created a simple website for. As I had predicted, he took the bait. A month later, a new online company emerged. The Chairman's Collection, their flagship product, a line of high-end leather-bound journals that were a direct, clumsy knockoff of my fake designs. The company was anonymous, but I knew it was him. He had outsourced the production, rushed it to market, eager to beat me, to steal my idea and do it better. The Chairman's Collection launched with a huge marketing push. He was pouring money into it. And then the reviews started coming in. Real reviews this time. The journals were falling apart. The fine Italian leather was cheap leather. It was a disaster. He had invested a small fortune into a failed product, damaging his own reputation for quality and excellence in his desperate attempt to destroy mine. I had used his own obsessive jealousy against him. It was a small victory, but it was sweet. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place one morning in early spring. An email arrived in my inbox. It was a generic marketing blast from the Women in Business Association, a call for nominations for their annual awards gala. On a whim, I nominated myself for Entrepreneur of the Year. I filled out the application, telling the story of the Gilded page. The real story. The struggles, the sabotage, the community that had rallied around me. I didn't expect to win. I didn't even expect to be a finalist. It was just a small act of defiance, a way of claiming my own narrative. A few weeks later, another email arrived. I was a finalist. I was invited to the awards gala. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. That same evening, Mark came home, whistling. He poured himself a celebratory glass of scotch. "You'll never guess what," he said, a smug grin on his face. "I've been nominated for an award," he puffed out his chest. The Chamber of Commerce, Humanitarian Businessman of the Year, for my work with the City Youth Foundation. Of course, the Youth Foundation he donated a token amount to for the tax write-off and the good press. It was all part of his carefully constructed public image. The benevolent king. "It's at the Grand Imperial Ballroom next month," he continued. "Black tie. You'll need a new dress." I felt a slow, cold smile spread across my face. The Grand Imperial Ballroom? What a coincidence. He looked at me, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. "The Women in Business Awards are on the same night," I said calmly. "At the same hotel."
He laughed.
A genuine, dismissive laugh. "Oh, that's nice, darling. For your little card company? That's sweet." He took a sip of his scotch, his attention already elsewhere. He had no idea. He didn't know I was a finalist. He didn't know we would be in the same room. He didn't know that the stage he was expecting to stand on was about to become the site of his own execution. The trap was set. All the pieces were in place. The night of the awards, the air in the limousine is thick with the scent of my perfume and his arrogance. He looks magnificent in his tuxedo, a man at the peak of his power. He hasn't asked me a single question about my award. As far as he's concerned, I'm a quaint opening act for his main event. "Try not to be too disappointed when you don't win, Eliza," he says, adjusting his cufflinks. "It's just an honor to be nominated for someone at your level." "I'll keep that in mind," I say, my voice even. Inside, my nerves are screaming. Evelyn, my forensic accountant, had sent me her final report that morning. The evidence was damning. It was all loaded onto a secure drive, ready to be sent to his company's board of directors and the SEC. My lawyer had it. We were just waiting for my signal. We walk into the ballroom, and it's a glittering spectacle of power and influence. The city's elite are all here. Mark is in his element, shaking hands, clapping backs, his laughter echoing. I am his silent, smiling shadow. We find our respective tables. His is at the front, a testament to his status. Mine is further back, but filled with the only people who matter to me. Chloe, Maya, and Sarah are all there, their faces alight with nervous excitement. The dinner is a blur. I can't eat. I just sip my water, my eyes fixed on the stage. I watch Mark. He's holding court, utterly confident, utterly oblivious. He thinks this is his night. He thinks this is the culmination of his success. The awards begin. They announce the first few categories. I feel a hand on my arm. It's Sarah. "You've got this," she whispers. I give her a shaky smile. And then, the presenter, a well-known local news anchor, walks to the podium. And now for the award for Entrepreneur of the Year. This award recognizes a woman who has built a business from the ground up, who has shown innovation, resilience, and an unbreakable spirit in the face of adversity. My heart is trying to beat its way out of my chest. The presenter lists the finalists.
My name is the last one, she says.
A camera finds our table, and my face is suddenly on the giant screens on either side of the stage.
I can feel hundreds of pairs of eyes on me.
I can feel Mark's eyes on me. I glance at his table. He has a look of bemused surprise on his face. The kind of look a parent gives a child who has unexpectedly managed to tie their own shoes. He still doesn't see me as a threat. He still sees me as his nobody. The winner, the presenter says, opening the envelope, is an entrepreneur who didn't just build a brand, she built a community. She turned a vicious online attack into a rallying cry for authenticity and support. She has shown us that the most powerful marketing tool is the human heart. A pause. The entire room holds its breath. The Entrepreneur of the Year is Eliza Mayhew of the Gilded page. The world explodes. My table erupts. Sarah is screaming in my ear. Chloe and Maya are hugging me, tears streaming down their faces. For a second, I can't move.
I'm paralyzed.
Then I push my chair back and I stand up. I look across the room at Mark's table. And I see it. The moment of impact. The moment the bullet he never saw coming finds its mark. His smile is gone, wiped clean from his face. His eyes are wide, fixed on the giant screen where my name is now displayed in glittering gold letters. Disbelief wars with confusion, and then, slowly, a cold, dawning horror begins to creep into his expression. He's starting to understand. He's starting to see the pieces click into place. The failed knockoff business. The backfired review campaign. My sudden, inexplicable success. It wasn't luck. It was a plan. I begin the long walk to the stage. It feels like I'm walking through water. Every step is deliberate, heavy. The applause is a physical force, washing over me. I can feel his eyes on me the entire way. Burning. I don't look at him again. I don't have to. I can feel his world shattering. I reach the stage and accept the heavy crystal award. I walk to the podium, my hands shaking slightly. I look out at the sea of faces, and then I find my team, my friends. I take a deep breath. Thank you. I begin, my voice clearer and stronger than I expected. Thank you to the committee, to my incredible team, and to every single person who ever bought a note card from me. You didn't just buy a piece of paper. You bought me a piece of my freedom. I let that hang in the air for a moment. I can see the curiosity on people's faces. They say that to be a successful entrepreneur, you have to be willing to go to war. I never thought that would be true for a stationery company, but it was. I start to tell my story. I don't name Mark. I don't have to. I am more clever than that. I talk about starting a business in a spare bedroom, a secret act of self-preservation. I talk about facing a competitor, a ghost competitor, one who seemed to know my every move. This competitor, I say, my voice ringing with a newfound power, didn't try to out-innovate me. They didn't try to create a better product. They tried to tear me down. They tried to sabotage my supply chain. They tried to destroy my reputation with lies. They tried to steal my designs. I see a flicker of movement from Mark's table. He's shifting in his seat. The people at his table are starting to look at him, then back at me. They're connecting the dots. His own partners, the men he plays golf with, The men he has been stealing from are watching him. His public image, the one he's so carefully curated, is starting to crack. There was a moment, I continue, my voice dropping slightly, becoming more intimate, when I almost gave up. When I believed the narrative this competitor was trying to write for me. The one where I was small and incapable and destined to fail. But then I realized something. Bullies are cowards. Their power is built on the fear of their victims. The moment you stop being afraid, their power vanishes. I raise my eyes and I look directly at him. Across the vast, crowded ballroom, our eyes lock. His face is pale, ashen. The mask of the powerful, benevolent businessman has fallen away, and all that is left is the small, terrified man underneath. He knows. He knows that I know everything. The embezzlement. The lies. All of it. In this moment, under the glare of 1,000 lights, with the entire city's business community watching, he is utterly, completely exposed. So, to anyone out there who has a dream that someone else is trying to extinguish, I say, my voice soaring, I am here to tell you, do not let them. Your light is your own. Your story is your own. And true success isn't about how much you can accumulate for yourself. It's about what you can build. And you can never, ever build something real on a foundation of lies. I finish my speech. For a heartbeat, there is silence. And then the room explodes. It's not just applause. It's a roar. A standing ovation. People are on their feet, their faces shining with emotion. They aren't just clapping for an entrepreneur. They're clapping for a survivor. As I walk off the stage, my award clutched in my hand, I take out my phone. I send a single, pre-written text message to my lawyer. It has only one word.
Now.
The aftermath is swift and brutal. While I am still shaking hands and accepting congratulations, my lawyer is emailing Evelyn's report to the chairman of the board of Mark's firm. By the time Mark gets home, his world is already on fire. He is suspended by the next morning. An internal investigation is launched. The SEC is notified. His face, once a symbol of corporate success in the city's business journal, is now plastered across the news for a very different reason. Embezzlement.
Fraud.
The humanitarian businessman of the year is a common thief. He tries to fight it, of course. He calls me, alternating between threats and pathetic pleas for forgiveness. I don't answer. I let my lawyer handle it. He has no leverage. The prenuptial agreement he forced me to sign is rendered void by his financial infidelity. In the divorce, I get more than I ever could have imagined. I get the house, the one that was my prison, and I sell it. The Gilded page flourishes. The publicity from the awards night is a rocket ship. We are inundated with orders, with partnership requests, with offers from investors. I hire more people. We move out of the dingy studio and into a bright, airy loft downtown with huge windows that overlook the city. Some days, I stand at those windows and I look out at the skyline, and I think about how far I've come. From a guest room to this. From a nobody to the woman on the stage. The anger is mostly gone now, replaced by a quiet, settled peace. It's not a story of revenge, not really. Revenge is a hot, messy emotion. This was colder. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming my own name, my own life. He created a monster, but not the one he thought. He thought he was creating a victim. Instead, he forced me to become a warrior. He handed me a sword and dared me to use it. The deepest irony is that I am, in a way, a product of his making. My success was built on the ashes of a life he tried to burn to the ground. It's a bittersweet victory, knowing that the best parts of my life had to be born from the worst parts of his. But they're mine. I built this. Thanks for being here with me through this. Hearing your stories and knowing where you're listening from, what time it is in your part of the world, it makes this whole thing feel a little less lonely. If you haven't yet, subscribing helps bring more of these stories to life.